Father, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to just come together to sing praises to you, to lift your name in the holy words of these songs. Father, we just thank you that you bring your word through Phil. We pray that you just bless him today as he comes. Lord, may everything that's done here today, everything that's said, everything that's sung, bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. You may greet your neighbor. You may be seated. As you're being seated, Joyce and Charlie both want to let you know that if you don't have lunch plans today, they're having a big barbecue at their house for people in the church. You don't have to bring anything if you haven't thought about coming, but they would love to have you. They live down on the main street across from the elementary school, and so you can hook up with anybody after church, ask them where they are. If you'd like to go down there, they would love to have you. So John Pounds, stand up, Johnny. John Pounds is going to play some offertory music for us right now. as we continue in a time of musical worship. I encourage you, some days, if you are anything like me, you get to a point where you can sing a song by rote and not actually think anything about the words that it said. So I encourage you today as you worship to think about the words in the songs that you are going to be saying, because those words are words that you literally get to say to the Lord. So if you will join us as we continue.
Take me has quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken for my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are
just want to come to you humbly and just thank you for the weather you provided this week, for the love you show, for being a great, great God. And I just want to pray and thank you for having a plan for all of us, even though there's times where we think there's no way it's going to work out. There's no way this is going to be good. There's no way I can get through this. And I just want to thank you for allowing us to know you are the way. You are the way through this. You are the way we're going to handle this. That we can't do anything without you. And I want to thank you for allowing us to come to you. With our heads bowed, on our knees, saying, we need you. Because we do. I just want you to allow us to hear the words that you have chosen for Phil to speak, and that you allow it to pierce our hearts and to mean something. And you allow us to learn what you want us to learn, gain what you want us to gain. I just pray for those that are struggling right now, that maybe feel lost, that maybe feel alone, that feel like there's no way they can overcome what they're going through, that they can, and that you show them comfort and love, and you allow those in their life to be that word, that light from you. I just pray that you allow them to have the strength to ask, and allow us to the strength and the knowledge to give them what they need. I just pray and thank you for sending your son and just letting us have a relationship with you. A God where we don't have to go through a mediator, we don't have to go through someone else and, hey, can you ask him this? We can go to you because you sent your son. I just pray and thank you for that relationship you want from us, that you need from us, that you desire, that we desire. I just pray and I ask that you allow me to be that person that you call me to be, that you allow me to go to you first. Not second, not third, not after I've tried everything else, but you allow me to come to you first, and you allow me to understand that I need you. I just pray and thank you, and I just want you to allow me to learn what I need to learn, and just hear those words that you want us to hear, gain something. Just be with us today in your son's holy name. Amen.
Children and youth are dismissed to discipleship. Please follow. It is good to welcome you hardy survivors of the fair and the 120-degree weather, or whatever it is we've been experiencing. Speaking of surviving, last night at the rodeo, my granddaughter, a few weeks ago, she decided she wanted to ride a sheep. She wanted to ride a mutton. And I had nothing to do with it, but somehow her and her mother concocted this idea, and there was a lot of question whether we really thought she'd even go ahead and get on the sheep. She doesn't care for pain that much, and she kind of, is a little, she likes to pose, she likes to perform, but riding a sheep, not necessarily, I didn't think. So we coached her up. We spent some time this week. We do something called wrestle fighting, which can be almost anything. We go up into my bedroom, which has an air conditioner, and we'll throw them around in blankets, or we'll wrestle. That's where it started with my kids. It was big time wrestling back in the day, and so that's where wrestle fighting started. So we were up there, and I thought I'd take that opportunity to do a little training on riding muttons. So I said, what you got to do, first of all, you grab a hold of the wool, and you hang on really tight, and then you wrap your legs around them really tight, and then when they open it up, you just hang on. And so they would grab a hold of my hair like that was the wool, and wrap their legs around tight, and then I'd charge out, as fast as I could charge out on my knees, and at this age, and gave each of the girls a couple repetitions of it, and coached them up. And lo and behold, Anessa got on the sheep yesterday, and had a little help from Mitch, had to get her just positioned just right and hold on to her, and they opened up the gate, and that sheep came out. First of all, before that, there were about 7 or 8 little kids who went first. Now, the part I did not, as a grandpa, I didn't go out and charging and then just dump them off really hard. I didn't tell them until later, when she kind of asked, how do you get off of it? And I said, oh, just jump off of it. I didn't coach him up on that part of it, because That's something you just have to experience. And so the gate opens up and the sheep charges out, and here she's hanging on, and she's hanging on, but she'd watched a bunch of other kids who got trampled pretty early and were crying and dirty, and so I think she was trying to avoid that. So she held on a long time, and actually wound up winning a buckle or whatever they win. Nothing, I don't know. But the thing that I wanted her to come out and share, but she's too bashful today. But apparently later, after the adrenaline wore off, and after they got all the dirt washed out of the pants and doctored the wound where the sheep stepped on her, after that, then Megan said, "Well, what were you thinking?" And she said, "Help me, Jesus." And if you don't learn anything else ever again, that's a good little prayer to know. Help me, Jesus. By the way, Michelle, how did Logan do yesterday? And he won it. All right, good. He won the siphon tube setting for his age and for everybody for his age. All right, fantastic. So, and I know that the Van Treeses did excellent, and who else did excellent at the fair yesterday? Anybody else want to brag or shout out here? But what's that? He won showmanship. All right, fantastic. So we got a lot of champions around here today, and that's that's exciting. So that was that was fun part of the week. There were other things in the week. I had the misfortune actually spending the parts of a couple of different days actually in a courtroom this week. Wasn't on my behalf, but I was actually over there on one occasion to watch Ross as he presented a very ugly sexual abuse case. And I know all of them probably are extremely unpleasant, but this one actually involved a mentally challenged girl and a an older large man, and so it was very disturbing. I heard the opening arguments on Monday, and then after it went to the jury, I called Ross and I said, "Do you want me to come over and just sit with you while we wait?" And he said, "Yeah, come on over." So we've been in those situations a lot. I remember when he had salmonella poisoning. I came home from summer camp one year, and Kay was sick, and Ross was sick, and the whole house was sick. And I actually wound up taking Ross to the hospital, and they hook him up on an IV. And so about every 5 minutes you got to take him to the bathroom, and so that's your job. And so we bonded over the years in these kind of situations a lot. So I thought, we'll go and we'll sit down and we'll just talk about things in life. As a result of things, and that week, it came to my attention later in the week. Sexual assault always seems to have an element of power and control involved, and that was especially true in this case. As I said, an older, muscular man, a young, handicapped girl. And prior to the judge and the jury entering the courtroom, the defendant was actually he was over on the left side, and the family was over on the other side, and he was turning around and giving a fist, to the victim's family and showing how powerful he was. And I've actually thought, there may be a fight right there in the courtroom. I might get involved and have to try to break it up. And Ross said, "Don't dare break it up." The defendant was pretty certain that he was going to walk. And then the jury came in and the verdict was read, and a scene erupted there in the courtroom like you would see on TV. The defendant's significant other burst out hysterically crying and screaming, and you couldn't quite tell what she was. She was just sobbing uncontrollably. But as she was escorted out, you could hear she was saying over and over again, "He didn't do it, he didn't do it, he didn't do it," just nonstop. And as I said, she was removed. And simultaneously, the family of the victim burst into celebration and applause and kind of a relief, a sigh of relief. It was an electrifying moment, and it was amazing to watch. It was amazing to watch the transformation take place, and especially this powerful man, this confident man, as he shrunk down into total submission and defeat. And the realization that he would probably never see the outside as a free man again. What had happened? So powerful, so confident one moment. Next moment reduced to this. Momentarily, there almost was a tinge of almost sympathy, which I quickly dismissed. He had come up against something bigger than himself, something he did not think possible, therefore something he certainly did not see coming. The impossible, the unexpected, the transcendent, that's what we're faced with today. That's what we're up against today. Problems that are too big for us to address, whether it's problems on a national and global scale of the economy and politics and race and business and health issues, or whether it's on a private, personal scale of divorce and reconciliation and finances and personal health, whatever that may be. Problems that seem insurmountable. Problems of hanging on to a out of control sheep and going, now what do I do? What's next? Problems that defy logic and solutions. That's where Elijah found himself. When he was at the end of himself, at the end of his rope, at the end of what he knew to do, and God suddenly turns the tables. And I know God is prepared to do that today in your situation, whatever you may be facing. So we're going to talk about what I've called the 4 essentials for the manifestation of God's power in our lives. In other words, how or where does the power come from when I am powerless? Where is the power I need to deal with these seemingly hopeless circumstances? And obviously, we're going to find that power comes from God. Help me, Jesus. But how and when? Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 17, as we continue our profile of the life of Elijah. And sometime later, verse 17, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill. He grew worse and worse and finally stopped breathing. Now we have a situation here that Elijah finds himself in that is truly hopeless. He learned by the brook at Cherith to develop a powerful prayer time and devotion time with God. There he learned to sit quietly by the brook and learn to pray and talk things over with God and trust God. Well, the brook dried up, and he was challenged to cross the desert 100 miles in the blazing 110-degree heat, not get caught, and locate a widow who was to provide for him. And this is the widow, and now her son is dead. Verse 18. So she said to Elijah, "What do you have against me, man of God? Did you come to remind me of my sin and to kill my son?" Whoa, where in the world did this come from? It comes from our natural tendency to blame somebody. We want to blame somebody. Who is at fault? Who's responsible for this mess? It's the first thing that comes to our mind. Who is at fault? Who broke the dish? Who spilled the milk? Who made the mess? Who caused this accident? In fact, I had witnessed a couple months ago a motorcycle accident head on with the automobile, and the insurance company had been trying to get a hold of me to get my statement. People want to know who's to blame, who's at fault. And naturally, the woman felt this had to be Elijah's fault. Who else are you going to blame? Going to blame herself? Elijah. It's got to be his fault. Why? Well, nothing like this had ever happened before. He is a religious man. She recognizes he is a religious man, and she recognizes her own sinfulness. So Elijah's presence had just drawn attention to how terrible she really was. She knew she was a sinner. She knew her past. She knew she was guilty. She knew she deserved this. But God had overlooked her transgressions all through life up until now, before Elijah came. That must be, his presence must be what drew God's attention and brought his wrath and the death of her son. And so she casts all this on Elijah. Why have you done this to me? Why has God done this to me? It's your fault, Elijah. You ever get blamed for something maybe wasn't really your fault? You ever get chewed out or yelled at just because your presence represents God? You ever have relatives who hate you because of what you stand for? That's where Elijah finds himself. But if I'm going to have power in my life, we'd better learn how to respond when we are unjustly attacked. This isn't Elijah's fault. It's a big coincidence at best. We know there aren't coincidences, though, from a human perspective. But Elijah had spent a lifetime, at least since we have met him, he'd spent a lifetime developing his character. And so the first essential is, number one, we must allow the development of the fruit of the Spirit. We must allow the development of the fruit of the Spirit, including gentleness. Elijah says in 19 verse 1, in 19, the first part of verse 19, chapter 17, verse 19, the first part. Give me your son, Elijah replied. He took him from her arms and carried him to the upper room where he was staying. Give me your son, he said, and he took him from her arms. He's not defensive. He doesn't yell at her. He doesn't get his feelings hurt. He stands there. He allows her to heap all of her hurt and loss and misplaced blame all on him, and he just takes it. And he responds gently. No sarcasm, no smart remark, no violent outburst. Give me your son. As a result of hours spent with God. As a result of hours spent with God, Elijah is beginning to look a lot like Jesus, which is the purpose that God has for you and I, is that we might look like his son. That we might demonstrate the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. Each of us in this room ought to be producing a crop like that. The fruit of the Spirit. That is what we should be growing and looking more and more like. And if we are, it will show up in the way we treat and respond to others. The fruit of the Spirit is about half how you feel inside, how you look and think of life, and half how you treat others. It truly is the way to mend all the ills of society. It's how Elijah was able, in spite of being a man or woman just like you and I, he was able to accomplish such amazing things. Submit yourself to the Holy Spirit. Yield to him, to his leading. How? It begins at Cherith, by the creek, in solitude. We'll put a number on it, 30 minutes a day in God's presence, in God's Word. Many times I share that to people, they go, is it that simple? Is it that easy? Yes, it is that simple, but it's not easy. Elijah was shut off. He was all alone with God for a significant block of time. And now here's this child. The breath is gone from him. The widow blames him for doing it. Actually, she blames herself, but transfers that blame over to Elijah, and Elijah takes it. And Elijah not only takes the blame and the guilt, but he takes the boy's body. Verse 19, give me your son. And he took him from her arms and carried him to the upper room where he was staying, and he laid him on his bed. Now Elijah retreats to the quiet room, to his sanctuary, where he could be all alone with God. Number one, first of all, was the changes in Elijah's life that came about as a result of spending time with God. He had allowed the fruit of the Spirit, including gentleness, to grow. Now, number two is about the changes that occur in our society, because in our society, in our families, in our relationships, because of the time we spend in solitude with God. Number two, we must cultivate the habit of the quiet room. We must cultivate the habit of the quiet room. I continue to meet with Dallas almost weekly. We're a little over 9 months since Eli took his life. I honestly don't think Dallas could be doing any better, and yet he is terrible. He's miserable. He's exercising tremendous faith, however, in spite of how he feels. In spite of how he feels, he has not turned his back on God. Elijah did not turn his back on God and run away from God when trouble struck, when maybe the worst calamity that he'd ever witnessed occurred. And we're all yet tempted to do that. And ask the question, how could a loving God allow something like this to happen? We're tempted to pull back. We're tempted to say, hey, if that's the way it is with God, if that's the way it is with church, I don't want anything to do with it. Not Elijah. He goes into the quiet place before God where he routinely would go. And verse 20, then he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought tragedy upon this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die?" He cries out, but he cried out to God. Dallas cries out, but he cries out to God. He runs to God. We go to God to answers. Turn to God for the answers, not away. He brought charges before God. Have you brought tragedy? He could talk very candidly with God. God can take our anger. God can take our being upset with him. He can take us yelling at him a little bit. You might want to just stick around for the rest of it, though. If you're faking it instead of faith in it, it might be hard for you to be real in front of God like that. And instead to just draw away. If we're trusting him, as I said, I think that's what Dallas is doing with this terrible tragedy he's gone through. He's faithing it, not faking it. He's faithing it. He's believing, he's trusting God even in the most difficult of circumstances. He's going to be okay. He's trusting God by coming to God with this impossible, this unfair situation. But we won't make it if we don't prepare ahead of time. That's why we must cultivate the habit of the quiet room, the quiet time with God, the time spent in prayer, the time getting away where it's just you and God. So Elijah turns to that place. He runs to that place. And verse 21, when he gets there, verse 21, so he cries out to God, "Have you done this? Have you brought tragedy upon this widow I'm staying with by causing her son to die?" Then he stretched himself out on the boy 3 times and cried to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." Now I look back and I tried to find a precedence in the raising of someone to life. And up until this point in time in history, I'm unaware of it ever occurring. Enoch walked with God. He kept walking and he wound up going to heaven. Didn't die and come back to life. Isaac was spared before he actually died. Elijah had no manual to pull out, no step-by-step method. Now I presume the Lord must have gave him an inkling, urged him what to do, and he obeyed. But yeah, I'm sure a lot of it he had to make up as he went along. One of the more enjoyable things on our recent trip to LA was I love to make things up as we go along. And one of the things we were down in the Skid Row area, and we went around the block, and here on the side of a building is a big painting that says city limit, Skid Row. Thank you very much. City limit, Skid Row. And there was somebody here that there was a big scroll that somebody had a felt pen, and they traveled all around the world with it. And now here it ended up at Skid Row, and they were just about to get it all finished, and I don't know who they were going to present it to, some kind of world peace movement or something. And so a guy named General, he said, "Hey, come up here. I want you guys to sign this," when he found out where we were from. And as Kathy said, this is Skid Row city limit right there on the building. And so we all stepped up there and, signed your name, God bless you, or whatever, and signed your name on it. And as I said, the guy's name is General that was there. And General says to me, and I was wearing, my son-in-law gave me a TVCC, a baseball shirt that I like to wear. I was wearing shorts. And the guy says, "Are you an athlete?" And I go, "Well, wannabe." And he appreciated that. And he said, "Well, you kind of talk like one. You move like one." And I said, "Well, we love to play back in the day." And he was excited because apparently they got a grant, and in that area they're going to repave their basketball court and redo their basketball court. And I said, "Next time we come, I'll bring my knee braces, and we'll go up there and we'll have a game of basketball, or we'll do something of that nature." So I'm looking forward, if I can even find this place on Skid Row again, looking forward to meeting up with General and making it kind of up as we go. I think Elijah was in a situation. I mean, how do you raise the dead? I don't know how to go about doing it. I don't even know how to start it. I looked at Jesus, I looked at Paul, I looked at Elisha, and each raising from the dead was a little different, or even a lot different. The solution to the problem that you're facing will probably be very unique. The one thing that is essential, however, is faith. The solution to the problems that we face is going to be unique to your situation and to you. But the common element is faith. Do you believe God? Do you trust God? Are you able and willing to offer yourself in service regardless of how you feel? Now imagine, okay, hey, Elijah, why don't you go lay down, face down on that boy on the bed 3 times? What? What? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. God may ask you to do something that looks ridiculous. May ask you to do something that you will be ridiculed for. May ask you to do something that may cost you. He may ask you to do something you're going to look stupid doing it. Elijah walked into that room overwhelmed, no precedence to bring someone back to life, and he returned with a living child. Now, you and I are not facing the same challenge, but you know you need God's power if you're going to succeed. You do not know how God might use you to help heal a marriage, to rescue a child. And I don't know that I've had a chance to thank you, but right there, Raleigh just left the room crying, and many of you have spent 5 years praying for that child. And I appreciate your prayers, and I thank God that He hears us and He rescues us. I've got a new couple in California and I'd like you to pray, to join with me praying. I'm not going to announce who it is. I will announce when they become pregnant. But they've been 7 years trying to have a family, unable to do so. Please be praying with me for them anonymously. You do not know how God may use you to bring a child in the world, to rescue a child, to bring encouragement, to save a soul. Elijah had no blueprint to follow, only faith. Prostrate yourself 3 times on the child. The posture that Elijah took was that of adoration or submission, signifying this wasn't him, this was God using him, working through him. Number 3 is offer ourselves in humble service under His shadow. Offer ourselves in humble service under His shadow. And number 4, step back in the shadow of the Savior. When you get back, when you get answer after God uses you in ways you never imagined, step back. The Lord heard Elijah's cry, verse 22. And the boy's life returned to him, and he lived. Elijah picked up the child and carried him down from the room into the house. He gave him his mother, and he said, "Look, your son is alive." He didn't say, "Hey, look what I did. Look what I found. Look how God used me. Look, your son is alive. And the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord from your mouth is the truth. I know there have been some tragedies this week. I know you may, unfortunately, there are going to be some in our futures. Mine as well. But God is a God of redemption. He is a God of resurrection. Jesus said, you will do greater things than me. Prepare yourself so you're ready. And then yield yourself. Dr. Raymond Edman, in his little book entitled In Quietness and Confidence, writes about a godly man who faced difficult trial. And he said this. He said, this is how he met me. He was quiet for a while with his Lord, and then he wrote these words for himself. First, he, or God, he brought me here. It is by his will I am in this straight place. In that fact I will rest. Next, he will keep me here in his love and give me grace to behave as his child. Third, he will make the trial a blessing, teaching me the lessons he intends me to learn and working in me the grace he means to bestow. And number 4, in his time he will bring me out again. How and when, he knows. Can you make these 4 statements? Number 1, I am here by God's appointment. Number 2, I am in his keeping. Number 3, I am under his training. And number 4, he will show me his purpose in his time. If you can, I want you to repeat after me. First of all, let me read it for you. Number 1, I am here by God's appointment. I'm here by God's appointment. Number 2, I am in his keeping. I am in his keeping. Number 3, I am under his training. I am under his training. Number 4, he will show me his purpose in his time. He will show me his purpose in his time. By God's appointment, in God's keeping, under his training, for his time. What an outstanding summary of what it means to trust in the Lord with all your heart. Chuck Swindoll writes, remember, you are here by God's appointment. You're in his keeping. You're under his training for this time. Give him the corpse of your life and ask him to revive those lifeless areas that need to be revived. If the situation calls for it, trust him for a miracle in his time, if it be his will for your life. On the bed of your life, place the remains of your broken and scarred past, the emptiness of your poor character traits, the habits that have so long controlled you, the limited vision that continues to characterize you, the slight irritation that nags or the large one that looms, the anger or the violence or the lust or the greed or the discontentment or the selfishness or the ugliness of pride. Lay these things before the Father and stretch yourself out under his shadow as you ask him to bring about remarkable, even miraculous changes in your life. Is he able? Get serious. He says, I'm referring to the God of impossibilities, the one who has limitless power, who has never and will never meet an intimidating obstacle that he cannot overcome, or an aggressive enemy that he cannot overwhelm, or a final decision that he cannot override, or a powerful person he cannot overshadow. Because Elijah believed in the God of impossibilities, not even death caused him to doubt. He learned his theology of faith in the secret hiding place at Cherith. He was given the opportunity to develop it during his advanced training at Zarephath. But it was not until he stared death in the face, literally, that he personified it. And he did it all standing in the shadow of God. And so must I, and so must you. Let's pray. Father, it is extremely humbling to realize and recognize how much more you have available for us if we'll just trust you, if we'll just have faith in you, if we will just continue to attempt to give every moment to you and live the way you want us to live, to grab a hold of life and take hold and say, help me, Jesus. Help me, Jesus. Lord, you've been so faithful. You're so powerful. You're so merciful and so loving. We appreciate it. We thank you. And we love you. In your Son's name. Amen.
It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. 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 It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. Have a great week.